to this explainer. Whether we're talking about building a massive skyscraper or just launching a brand new smartphone app, the baseline stakes are pretty much universal. You absolutely want your project to succeed, and you definitely don't want it to fall apart halfway through. So today, we're unpacking the fundamental frameworks that govern how work actually gets done in the modern world.
Okay, let's dive right into this. At its absolute core, project management isn't just about scheduling endless meetings or checking off to-do lists. It's a really delicate, high-stakes balancing act. Literally, every single project out there is trying to hit this exact equilibrium between time, costs, and quality. Think about it. If you want something done incredibly fast and with top-tier quality, well, it's going to cost a fortune. But if you want it cheap and fast, you guessed it, the quality completely drops. So project management methods are essentially the structured tools we use to organize people efficiently, mitigate the risks of totally failing, and keep that golden triangle of time, cost, and quality in perfect harmony.
Here is our very own project plan for this explainer. First, steering projects successfully. Second, classic methods, strictly to plan. Third, agile methods, flexible and fast. Fourth, a practical comparison, bridge or app. And finally, number 5, hybrid approaches, the best combined.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Steering Projects Successfully.
So, organizing people and resources obviously requires distinct frameworks. But before we get into the nitty-gritty or specific methods, I need to make one thing absolutely clear. And this is the main thing I want you to take away today. There is no single, magical, perfect method out there. Actually, scratch that. If there were a silver bullet, everyone would just use that one and call it a day. The right choice depends entirely on the specific conditions of your project. Success isn't about finding a one-size-fits-all solution. It's about looking at your environment, your goals, and your team, and then pulling the exact right tool out of your toolbox. Moving on to Section 2. Classic methods, strictly to plan.
And this brings us to the absolute grandfather of them all, the waterfall model. You can see how the steps just naturally cascade down, one right after the other. You start with requirement analysis, figuring out exactly what you need to build, then planning, then implementation, testing, and finally the rollout. Now, the strict, absolute rule here is that every single phase must completely be finished before the next one begins. You literally do not build until the planning is perfectly locked in. This method is fantastic because it maximizes transparency. Everyone knows exactly what the budget is, exactly who is responsible, and exactly when the whole thing should be done. It is structured, it is deliberate, and it is highly predictable.
But what if you are in the implementation phase, say 6 months deep into the project, and the client suddenly says they need something completely different? What happens if the requirements change halfway through? In a super rigid model like Waterfall, that is basically a disaster. It means massive delays and skyrocketing costs, mostly because you have to swim all the way back up the waterfall just to start over. To add a layer of extreme quality control to this classic approach, we have what's called the V model. Picture a giant letter V. On the downward left slope, you have all your planning and specification steps. On the upward right slope, you have your testing and validation. For every single planning step on the left, there is a direct corresponding quality assurance test on the right. It's an incredible evolution of the waterfall method, specifically for highly regulated, critical fields. If you are building software for an airplane or an MRI machine for a hospital, you absolutely cannot afford a single bug. The V model ensures every requirement is rigorously tested, but again, it requires a massive organizational effort and leaves very little room to pivot once you actually start.
Section 3. Agile methods, flexible and fast.
Right, so what do we do when things are totally unpredictable? We pivot. We move to the absolute core engine of Agile, the Scrum sprint. Instead of planning a project out for 2 years and just crossing your fingers that the customer likes it at the end, Scrum breaks the work down into really short, aggressive cycles of 2 to 4 weeks. The key here is that at the end of a sprint, you must have a usable intermediate result, a working piece of software, a prototype, something real. You show it to the customer, you get their immediate feedback, and you feed that right back into the next sprint. Scrum doesn't fear changing requirements. It literally embraces them as a fundamental part of the process. Another incredibly popular Agile tool is Kanban. Now, instead of time-box sprints, Kanban is all about continuous flow. You visualize your entire workflow on a board. Columns for to-do, doing, and done. It instantly makes the process transparent. If 10 tasks are suddenly piling up in the testing column, you can immediately spot the bottleneck and swarm the problem. It's fluid, it's fast, and it's perfectly designed for environments like IT support or continuous development where tasks just constantly keep rolling in.
Section 4. Practical comparison, bridge your app.
Okay, we've seen both sides now. The crucial point here is understanding how these two philosophies actually deal with uncertainty. Classic project management believes the very best way to reduce risk is through massive, comprehensive, upfront planning. Think of every single variable, write it down, and stick to the plan. Agile, on the other hand, fundamentally disagrees. Agile believes the world changes way too fast, so the best way to reduce risk is through rapid learning and constant feedback. Build a little, test a little, learn a lot. When we map this out across real-world industries with this handy cheat sheet, we start to see some really clear divisions. Under Classic, we see projects where requirements are totally locked and safety or strict regulation is key. Construction, laying infrastructure, developing complex medical tech. You absolutely need the Waterfall or the V model here. But over on the Agile side, we see software, digital products, and research and innovation. These are environments with super high uncertainty, a strong customer focus, and incredibly short development cycles. That's exactly where Scrum thrives. Let's ground this in physical reality for a second. Think about building a literal bridge. You know exactly how wide the river is, you know gravity isn't going to magically change tomorrow, and you absolutely do not want the client asking to move the bridge 50 feet to the left halfway through construction. Classic methods are mandatory here. Late changes are dangerous and incredibly expensive. But developing a smartphone app? That market is totally dynamic. A competitor launches a new feature, user trends shift overnight, some new piece of tech drops. If you spend 2 years planning an app using the Waterfall model, I guarantee it will be completely obsolete the day you release it. You need the dynamic engine of Scrum just to survive. Which brings us to our final section, number 5, hybrid approaches, the best combined. So, the real world of business isn't always black and white, is it? It's often very gray. And today, those strict boundaries are totally blurring. Executives still need to know how much a project will cost and exactly when it will launch. They demand classic predictability. But the development teams on the ground, they need the flexibility to adapt to daily challenges. They demand Agile. Enter hybrid project management. It is the pragmatic savior that successfully combines both. It wraps the execution flexibility of Agile safely inside the long-term structure and budgeting of classic methods. Let's look at how these two lock together seamlessly on a timeline. In month 1, management uses classic methods to define the project charter, secure the budget, and set the final go-live date. It's totally locked in. But then, inside that structured timeline, during months 2 and 3, the execution team runs agile sprints. They iterate, they prototype, they adapt to micro changes on the fly, as long as they stay within that initial budget. Finally, month 4 hits and the official go-live happens right on schedule. It gives management the transparency they crave while giving the creators the actual freedom they require to do their best work. It's the best of both worlds. Ultimately, understanding project management isn't about memorizing terminology, it's about adaptability. As our source material beautifully concludes, your success depends less on forcing one single method onto your team and entirely on your critical ability to read the situation and choose the right approach. Are you building a bridge, an app, or something right in between? So as you head into your next big initiative, I'll leave you with this question to ponder. Are you letting your methods dictate your work, or are you actively choosing the framework that guarantees your success? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.